you know what cheese curds, motorcycles, and surf rods have in common? Turns out the best of all come from Wisconsin.
That's right. We're talking the 77-year-old, family-owned American company, St. Croix Rod, where the surf is no part-time business. Offering 41 models across 5 distinct surf series, St. Croix has been designing and handcrafting high-performance, tech-forward surf rods for decades.
Simply put, St. Croix combines the best technology and components with the lengths, powers, and actions demanded by discerning anglers up and down the Striper Coast. All this to say that St. Croix is the premier choice for anglers who demand the best rods on earth. Check out the full lineup at stcroixrods.com.
Beginning in the 1970s as a mail-order catalog, the Surfcaster has long been known as the source for hard-to-find surf fishing gear, and I've been personally shopping with them since the 1980s. They offer honest advice and the best recommendations regardless of your experience level, and will tailor their suggestions to what you actually need.
As you would expect from a business that's been serving the surfcasting community for 50 years, their prices are competitive and delivery is always quick and secure. They want you to have the best possible experience in the surf and have the knowledge and inventory to put the right gear in your hands to make that happen. So check out the Surfcaster at www.thesurfcaster.com, and if you're in the area, stop into their brand new brick and mortar store in Shelton, Connecticut. Welcome back to the Surfcast Podcast once again. Today we have an interesting topic that was all brought about because of our conversation with John Skinner on our New York season opener episode, the interview we did with him about eels in 2025, if you're listening to this long in the future. And in that, I asked him a question, which he got confused and didn't understand what I was asking, which is my own fault. But it was, how do you beat the eel? If you have to, pick a lure to outfish an eel, what do you do? And the first thing we want to say is that it's not really possible. Right off the bat, I want to make it very clear, we're not going to pretend that, there's a secret sauce of a lure where if you put it out there, you are going to be as productive as the eel. You're simply not, okay? So we just have to get that out of the way right away. I've lived it for years. You're not going to beat the eel 99.9% of the time. The other thing I'm going to put out there is that we also, in this discussion, and in the examples that I'm going to have, and you're going to have, Toby, we are not going to talk extreme conditions because, yes, if you've got huge waves and, strong wind, then, yes, you could outfish an eel with a bucktail, a simple bucktail. Absolutely. That doesn't really count, and that's cheating. And the other thing that I want to say that we're not going to include in this is casting distance, although I'm going to kind of break that rule a little bit with one of my examples later on. But, yes, you can outfish an eel if the person can't reach the spot and you're casting a pencil popper or something like that, right? So that's another. Mm-hmm. That's another example of something that you could beat it with, but it's not really, oranges to oranges. So we just want to get those out of the way before we start giving you some examples. And when we were having this conversation about the topic, Toby, you said something really interesting to me and you had a good story. So I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about equal versus equal, which is what we were talking about.
Yeah, and that's kind of a thing that I was initially thinking is it also is, all of the caveats we're throwing here before we get 1,000 comments of dude this or this one time or all that crap.
Exactly.
Forgot about the wind. It is equal abilities, meaning if you were matching up a super high level eeler against a super high level plugger or a crappy eeler against a crappy plugger, essentially meaning their abilities are equal for what they're doing. You still, overall, aren't going to beat the eel. And again, taking out those outliers, those crazy conditions, the one-offs, that one time that this or that happened. And as I was thinking about it, because I was thinking, Jerry's admittedly not an eel guy.
No.
So if I put eels in his hand and plugs in my hand, that's not a fair fight.
No.
But I came up with an example that was a fair fight that exemplifies this concept that you really can't beat the eel. And it wasn't something that just happened like one night. It wasn't something that happened just one tide cycle. It was something that happened for a full season, and maybe even it was most apparent over an entire season, but over multiple seasons in reality at this area where there's a lot of bunker. And this was the examples, and I'm specifically thinking and playing off in my head, occurred when bunker was a rarity, sort of like it is now. So it was like before the bunker boom that we had, then it last, 10, 15 years, that inshore craziness. It was like the first spot where I ran at the bunker and I was like, holy crap, there's a ton of bunker here. I gotta like figure out how to do this, going back to, 25 years ago when this type of stuff would happen. So we had bunker and we had big bass. And there was 2 of us that were fishing this regularly throughout the season. And my fishing partner that was on this with me was every bit as good of an angler as I am, and was on eels and on plugs. We fished together a lot. So we've got an even playing field. And he actually found the bite, got on it initially, and was getting into fish on eels. Even though there's bunker. I mean, not just like we heard bunker. Like we could see schools of bunker. We could see the bass blowing up a bunker. So he was eeling. He liked to eel, so that's what he started with. And when I joined him, I was like, oh, bunker? I'm throwing bunker-type plugs and lures. And I went through my arsenal of every trick, with the exception of chunking. I will take that out. I didn't compare chunking to it.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't access them. They were still not easily netted at that time, and it was definitely before my chunking evolution. But with the eels, we were getting consistently throughout the season 30 and 40 pound striped bass, standing on these same rocks that plugging. I do not think we broke 20 pounds. And in the middle of a night when we're hammering fish on the eels, as I do now, I would change over to plugs. Be like, this is the night. There's something here. They're just feeding. They'll hit anything. And I'd start plugging, and I wouldn't do anything. And I'd throw a sluggo, and I'd throw a Danny, and I'd throw a darter, and I'd throw a glide bait, and I'd throw a redfin. And again, maybe I hit 20 pounds. If I was lucky, I would pull the fish in that size. While my buddy standing right next to me continues eeling, and he's sliding, 25, 28, 37 pound fish, maybe a 40. And I'm like, what the hell? And it drove me nuts, because then it became like this challenge of there's gotta be something. And I started asking around, and I was talking to guys anyone that I felt comfortable with and respected their opinion. Even started, I actually remember I had a discussion on an open forum message board at the time. Like, look, this is the scenario. What does everybody think? And we never came up with anything on the artificial side. And it was so weird because, again, they're on bunker. Yet the eels were working. But when we threw stuff that looked like the bunker, it didn't work. It was like, is it, people were throwing around ideas. Well, there's just so many bunker that your bunker replicator is just getting lost in the crowd. I'm like, yeah, but the eel is getting hammered. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like we had to work with the eels to get the fish to bite. It was bomb the eel out, let it start to swim down, and you were literally counting the seconds till you had your hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, and again, not an outlier. This was something that went on for a full season, that crazy. And then it was a pretty consistent spot, relatively similar to that for quite a while, for quite a few seasons. And that's a spot I haven't fished in a while. It maybe now it's going to be back in my mind.
Now it's in your mind. Yeah, you just got that little kernel growing. I mean, look, you had that experience for a season. I lived this for, I was trying to think about this morning, I think 7 years. For 7 seasons, I fished one spot with my friend. He only eel fishes. I only plugged, and I had to sit there and suffer while he caught fish many of the nights, and I caught nothing many of the nights. And there were some nights where I caught something, and on those nights that I caught something, he usually did much better than I did. But there were some situations where I was able to outfish him or match him. And I guess, do you want me to give you an example right now? I'm not sure what order to do these in, so I guess I'll pick one of the lesser ones rather than jump into the big one. one of the ways that I did this, that I beat the eel, I think it's a little bit cheating, and that's why I'm going to lead with it first, because it is a little bit of a casting distance thing. In this situation, I was able to outfish him, and I was using needlefish. And the reason is because I was casting it out onto a sandbar, and I was dragging the needle right across the sandbar, right in the sand, and dropping it off the edge of the sandbar. This is something I've done all over the Striper Coast and can work pretty well with a variety of lures. And I talk about it in seminars, and it's a little more complicated than it sounds, and there's better or lesser ways to do it. But I could see that there was just a little bit of a churn over the top, and I was pulling the needle over, and I was dropping it into the trough, and the fish were coming not immediately. They weren't coming the second it fell off, but it was a few cranks or so in. So I'm assuming that they were in the trough at the edge, but they're not like sitting there staring, waiting. Or maybe they were, but I'm not, they're a little bit further to the right or the left of where I was casting or whatever. And I tried fan casting, but, they're like maybe running that edge. And he would cast the eel out, and he could not get to the sandbar, could not even come close, about halfway. But he was putting them into the trough. And I remember him saying to me, and again, I mean, how many fish did I get? Half dozen? I don't know. They were teen fish, maybe a 20. I mean, we're not talking big fish. But I remember him saying that he was surprised because he felt that if he threw the needle out, or the eel out into the trough and let it sit, and just slowly retreat it back, that the fish would come off of whatever they were doing and come find it, because they could smell it, because they could sense it, and they would come find it. Because, of course, fish are always going to eat the eel, right? The fish are always going to eat the eel. That's what we say. That's what we hear all the time. Oh, the fish are always going to eat the eel, no matter what. And he was surprised. He was excited for me, actually, because he saw me suffer so much over those years. He saw me suffering. So he was surprised. We both were a little bit surprised that I was able to put those fish on the beach when the eel would not produce.
I bet if you added it up, more striped bass were caught from the surf last year on plastic swimmers than any other plug. Probably even more than bucktails. The reason is simple. For generations, the plastic swimmer has proven to be a versatile, effective, and affordable fish catching machine.
And that's where the new Hogy OG Swimmer comes in. Unlike most of the other modern swimmers that all look and act alike, the OG Swimmer brings together a traditional design with modern enhancements to offer anglers with a unique and highly effective swimming plug unlike anything else currently on the market. With a unique wobbling action, it moves like an injured baitfish, and it's a large profile, chunky and tubular, and measuring in at 7 inches. Plus, with a downturn line tie, the OG Swimmer stays shallow, making it ideal for surf anglers.
All of this is tied together in an extra hard body that's through-wired and decked out with VMC hooks and a hand-tied bucktail teaser. And just like the Hogy needlefish, you won't find a rear hook on this lure, which is better for the fish, better for your hands, and easier on your wallet. This is all part of the Hook One platform, as well as Hogy's new core philosophy, quality for today, conservation for tomorrow. To find out more about this mission, and to pick up one of these premium OG swimmers, be sure to check out www.hogylures.com. So I don't know if I'm going to fully give you that one, because you did say the distance, but you're splashdown, but you're still fishing through the same water. So maybe I will. I'll concede.
Borderline.
I'll give that one back to you. That one, you got it. Yeah, you can take that one because, again, you were at least fishing through the same water. Which kind of brings me to a thought process on my end that if I was forced, some crazy scenario, you have to, do better on artificials than the eels, casting the same distance. How are you going to do it? I think, the most obvious thing that pops into my head is the rubber eel style soft plastics that are just so popular now, and something that you and I both really have gotten into fishing. And as someone who used to fish eels a ton along with artificials, for me, it has really replaced it being those rubber eels in the different varieties, the sluggos, the hoagies, the Joe bags, the gravity tackles, all that whole family that we could get into. I could list off for the next 3 minutes. That whole family of artificials has fit into my arsenal where eels used to for a variety of reasons. Won't get into them all today. But if I had to try somehow to consistently beat the live eel, which I really don't think I could. I could come close to maybe matching or at least doing acceptably close. that's what it would be for me, because they are so similar in that obviously they look the same. I mean, that's why we call them the rubber eels, because it looks like a freaking rubber eel. But they fish really similar. You cast the same distance. They're equally crappy casting items. They flip, flop, swirl, twirl, catch the wind every bad way that they possibly could. You're praying for that wind at your back to really bomb them out. So they are really equal. But for my findings, where I could take, let's just say, an eel, a live eel, and a hook, and put the hook in the eel and fish it, in a bunch of different situations, the current, calm conditions, a little more surf, wind, whatever the things are, I have to rework my rigging with the rubber. So it's like I have to go through, 9 levels to match the one. So is it matching 1-to-1? No, even in that case, like my best case scenario, could I do it? No, but it's, there's a lot of live eel fishing is fun. Like I get that a lot. It's not as fun throwing the live bait or eels or chunking and all that, and it's not as fulfilling. That's just crap. Like it's I take just as much pleasure in both, but it's been for me one of the reasons why like the rubber eels have come in place of the live is because it was a challenge figuring these things out. And there's nights when I'm throwing the rubber eels and I'm doing fine. Just an average night, and even then I'm like, if I had a dozen eels on me right now, I'd probably be doing better. It's like that same thing as like when I'm plugging and I'm like, man, if I had some chunks, we don't know, but you kind of always think, and that's always in the back of my mind, no matter what I'm throwing on the artificials, is that I probably would be doing a little better, and maybe if I didn't do a little better numbers wise, maybe that one big fish of this session would come on the eels that I'm just not going to get on the artificials.
Yeah, and I think you said that the big rubber, which I don't like calling eel, so I'm stumbling. The big rubber baits, which gets to my next point. While they are eely like, especially those long ones like the hoagies and the GTs and the bags and the whippet eel from Algags and all that stuff, twitch it, excuse me. I think. Also, Game On, by the way, another good one. I think that they replicate more than just eels, and I've gone on record saying this many times, and I think that makes them more of a catch-all for just big bait. So now you have the advantage of, it's not just an eel, it could be replicating the pattern, the vibrational pattern of a lot of different big baits as it moves through the water, depending on how you deliver it. But also, you are probably replicating an eel, especially if you're like drifting it and it's real slow in the water. It's probably giving out the same signature. So, just want to put that out there. So now, the eel is sort of just the eel, but the thing is, the eel cuts through everything, like we just talked about when we were talking about the bunker, right? So it doesn't matter. But it's interesting in that way that big soft plastic cuts through everything. The eel cuts through everything, but for different reasons. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. Now, the whole crux of this episode, though, is going to come down to this next point, I think, because I think I can really strongly make the case where I have repeatedly matched or exceeded the eel in one particular situation in one particular spot. Do you want to guess the plug that I did it with, Toby? You don't. He doesn't know, guys. So everybody listening to this, he really does not know. So... Or maybe I did tell you. Did I tell you? If I told you, don't guess.
I think so. I'm going to guess. I will just guess. And this is more so based on what I know you like to throw.
Okay.
And what, although, no, because I was going to say the Weston Glide.
Okay. I did have an example with gliders, but I'm not going to use that today.
Yeah, I was thinking that because you've told me so many times that has pulled fish out when other things weren't, or it's upsized. In a lot of ways. So that's where I was going. So what? All right, what was it? What is it?
It's actually the Super Strike Darter. So the Super Strike Darter. So the darter, and you probably could do it with different darters, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, a little bit of an explanation. So in this particular spot, lots of strong current. Not Morich's Inlet, but we're talking strong current. We also don't have 30 feet of water. This place does not have that kind of depth. So I'm not exactly sure. Maybe 5 to 10 feet. And 10 feet at the extreme is what I would say. It is a place that my friend has produced plenty of big fish and eels. He throws, okay, so let's say wherever you're sitting or driving or whatever, picture The current is coming right to left. Okay, what would he do with the eel? Okay, he's casting it up 130 roughly, connecting with it, letting the eel swim down through 12 o'clock, maybe even 11:30, and then tries to hold it, tries to let that thing swing through the zone, and then, it starts to come up by 10, 10:30, 10:09, and then he actually lets it swing all the way around and reels it straight back to himself. And at that point, it's, even when the eel is fresh, it's like near the surface, but he's caught fish like that, so he does it every time, right? The same thing you would do with a soft plastic, the same thing you would do with a needlefish, the same thing you would do with a bucktail, but that eel is getting down and swing through the zone. The problem is, and he knows this is the problem, after 10, 15, 20 casts with an eel, the eel is exhausted. The eel is exhausted. So he casts it at 1:30, maybe even 2 o'clock, lets it get down, and then it gets through 12, 11 o'clock, and it starts to come up, right? Now, what I do at this spot is, a lot of you would do the same thing with the darter. You'd cast at 12:30 or 1 o'clock, connect with it, get the darter connected, get it down a little bit, and then just start swinging it through the zone and letting it swim back to you, right? I do not do that at this spot. Instead, I cast at 12 or 11:30. So the second that sucker touches down, I'm in the current. I don't give it fast cranks. I don't, crank it in. I just put the line on the roller and I just start reeling. And what the darter does and why it outfishes is because then I'm almost just holding it and letting it swim through the current. And in this particular spot, it's finding all the seams. It's hunting. It's hunting for all the seams, all the eddies, every sand wave, every little hole, every little piece of structure that's in this. And it's mostly soft structure. And that changes. And it's finding all those spots, and I can feel it. So as it comes into these zones that are softer with less current, your inclination is you lose contact with it, and you want to keep going faster. And instead, I'll stop. Or maybe if I'm going at kind of a pace, I'll come almost to a stop. And so what I'm picturing and what I think is working is that darter is dipping into these zones where the fish are hanging at the edges. I don't think that they're fully sitting in these pockets where there's nothing, but they could be. They could be. I just don't know. But my assumption is that as it comes into the zone, they're at the edge and they nail it. What is even more common, what happens is as it comes out of that zone, they nail it. And I think what's happening is that darter, they're sensing it, it's coming in, it gets into the zone, and now it's barely even moving. And they're like, whoa, why is it not doing anything? Why isn't it moving? They're just sitting there. It's a little off-putting for it to just not be moving, or it's right in their face. But then it slides into the current, and just as it starts to take off again, maybe it darts, maybe it really starts to all of a sudden take off and swing, and bam, they'll nail it. And I've had a couple of very nice fish that way, very high 30s nice fish, and lots of other fish doing this. And that has really been the only way that I can match him or exceed him. And I have exceeded him on nights. And it has nothing to do with casting distance, because we're fishing the exact same thing of water. I mean, I like soft cast half the time. I'm not trying to lob. And what we both do in this particular place, though, is we move. We'll move because for both of us, we're only fishing these slices. So it's almost like you fish the slice however many times, then you move. And you fish another slice for however many times, then you move. And then maybe you come back, and then you move around. So we're doing a lot of moving around. I do way more moving around than him, because his assumption is the fish that are potentially moving, he's going to intercept, whereas I'm assuming every fish that's moving is just going to ignore my darter, that I'm only going to get them when they're hung in those spots. And that has been the difference. So that has been the way that I've been able to beat the eel. And it's one place, but it's not one time. It's not one tide. It's not one year. It's not multiple. It's not one moon. This has been multiple times over 6 or 7 years that we fished together that I did this.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely an interesting concept. As you're going through it all, it's making me want to go buy a dozen eels and go give it a shot and see what I could do against you there.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing for sure. I would be interested to see what you could do. And also if you started messing with weight with the eel, how that might also affect performance. But I'm not sure, because I'm not an eeler. This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.